Welcome to Undoing I Do with Stephanie and Ade. I am Stephanie Hunnell, the owner of the Hunnell Law Group in Asbury Park, New Jersey, and your co-host for this evening.
And I am Adela Sherilyn Dow, the owner of the law offices of Adela Sherilyn Dow on Staten Island. How are you? Welcome back.
I've missed your face so much.
Happy New Year.
It was nice having a little break, but I am so excited to be back with you.
I am excited too. This is the longest that I haven't spoken to you every week about our show.
I know. It has been. I just clicked my phone and it went loud. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's what that was. Okay.
I know. It has been a long time.
I know, but we've been talking behind the scenes on our little texts or our little, emails. And we've been watching all of the drama unfolding in our country in the last 24 hours. I mean, we could always act like it's limited to the last 24 hours, even though we know it's not. But
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think I'd be remiss if we didn't say a little something about what's been going on in the country. It was really scary yesterday. And I have to tell you, as a little kid that loved the law, loved civil service, loved all of this stuff, and I really aspired to be a lawyer, the little kid inside of me that saw the Capitol being stormed and desecrated, in my opinion, it was just devastating. I've never seen anything like it. It was devastating.
So, I had to tell my daughter, who's 7, right, that this is not normal. This is not the way we do things. This is not, what happens in an election year, because she's only 7, and the last election year she had, she was 3. What would she know?
Right.
And so she's like, "Mommy, somebody died? Like, what do you mean somebody? Who was this person? What happened?" Look, it's fine to have differing political opinions. I mean, I have differing political opinions from most of my friend base. And I tend to have more of a conservative bend in things, but common sense is common sense.
Yeah.
And love of country doesn't equal tearing your country apart.
Right.
Never heard of that. Never heard of that as being one of the tick offs that you have to ascribe to as a patriot. Never heard of that.
Nope, literally tearing it apart. And by the way, the sacred halls, going in onto the floor. I remember the first time I walked onto the floor, there's this sense of reverence when you go in. It's just, this is where history was happening and so many laws have been created. And then just to jump and people hanging off the wall and, jumping and sitting in the seats and then just trashing offices.
Podiums. Here's homeboy with a whole podium. Just and I don't even know what the dude was.
The guy with the
it's looking like Ben-Hur. I'm like, what the heck? Like, where do we do this? This is not what we as Americans are about.
No, it's not. And it sort of reminded me of a little bit of our topic today, because we're talking about misconceptions of divorce and annulments. And so one of the things that I kept seeing, politicalness aside, Democrat, Republican, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
There is no legal authority for Mike Pence to overturn the vote and the will of the people.
Big up to Mike Pence, by the way, because yes. I was up at 2:00 in the morning watching this. I was really working, but I was watching the counts, and I was very proud of Mike Pence.
I was as well. I was very proud of him. I thought his speech was empowering. I big ups to him. And I think that he did a great job. I think he really did a great job. I think that he had a really tough road, because apparently he was getting a lot of pressure to do something he wasn't legally allowed to do. He repeatedly told the president he wasn't allowed to do this. And then I think, unfortunately, the president is telling his base that this can be done. And so his base is believing that this can be done. And these people that were at his rallies were getting all hyper, and he was telling them to walk down the street and you need to let your voices be heard and you need to do it loudly. And, Rudy Giuliani calling for, what is it, trial by combat, and really riling them up, thinking that they had an ability to change the outcome of the election. And I think that misconception, which a lot of people really believe, led to this huge amount of chaos and insurrection and whatever you want to call it down at the Capitol.
Yeah, the last person who I heard call for trial by combat, who shall remain nameless, in my area is in federal prison right now. So, not thinking that really just works out.
I think, wasn't like maybe 2 years ago, a divorce was happening where the husband said, I want to have trial by combat. Let's get our swords out or something.
The case that I'm thinking about wasn't a divorce case, but it was a civil case, and it was the attorney who was saying that. So if there's another case out there, I'm now going to have to look that up, because I was just mesmerized by that whole concept in the first place, even though it's on the books. It's on the books. I mean, in New York State it is. But yeah, not rational. Not really rational. Not in these times. But yeah, it's scary. I'm glad that we live in kind of the suburbs of, the New York City area, because quite frankly, if I lived in the city proper, I might be a little bit concerned. Because we see what happens. And I will tell you that as a, I don't know everybody, some people will say, oh, you're pulling the race card, but quite frankly, I don't know whether you saw me say on social media, because I tend to stay very apolitical with my media posts. It has to really annoy me to say something. But all I could think about was that if this was a whole bunch of Darnells and Jeromes, and again, no shade to anybody named Darnell or Jerome. I'm just saying, if this was these are some names that people would consider to be indicators of your race as an African American. But I could not help but think throughout this entire episode that had it been Black men out there, there would have been nothing but bodies lying around.
Yep, I think that was one of the first comments my husband and I made when we saw this happening. Because if you'll remember, just back to the summer, there were the Black Lives Matter protests, and they had a huge showing of force on the steps of, I think it was the Lincoln Memorial. Right. And, fine, it kept the peace. That's, what they did. But there was nothing like that yesterday. And they were well aware of the numbers. And so I'm anxious to see what they're going to say actually about why they didn't have any show force.
I mean, did you see some of the law enforcement inside the Capitol taking selfies? I mean, unless they were really cops somewhere else and came in their uniforms, and even if that's the case, that's a whole other situation. But if any of these people were actually charged and paid by us, the citizens of the United States, to guard our house, absolutely deplorable. I don't understand how, as of this morning, there were only a few arrests. Couldn't get that. Couldn't understand that at all. Somebody was shot. Okay, I don't know whether DC has a felony murder statute. I have no idea. But folks need to, folks need to go down.
So far, 4 people have died. I guess the report today that I saw was that 4 people died.
Right. 4 people died. 1 woman got shot, and the other people died because of medical emergencies suffered during this conflagration. It's just scary stuff. And I tell you that having third world roots, right? And coming from a country that has had military coups and been run by the military. And I was born here, but my father is Nigerian. May his soul rest in peace. I just never thought I would see this type of showdown in the United States of America. I just
Mhm.
never ever envisioned anything like this.
No, me
And
neither.
it really makes you doubt your safety in a whole nother way. And it makes you doubt the intentions of your fellow American. And that's a sad situation, you
Mhm.
know? Yeah. Yeah. So our we're fangirls of Aisha. She's like,
We
hey.
are. Yes, we are.
But Aisha is also from Nigeria, and she was saying that what happened yesterday brought her back to her days of being in school and being picked up early during the coup. And I mean, it's just scary.
Yeah, yeah, she
Um,
said it was terrifying then, and I can imagine, and I'm glad you mentioned about your daughter because I don't have kids, and I don't know how I would go about explaining what was happening yesterday in the United States.
hmm Yeah, I don't think it was it's difficult, but thankfully, we have these hard conversations with our kids. That's what we're charged to do as parents, and they don't, she doesn't understand everything, and she won't, and I don't want her to.
Yeah,
Um, but I didn't want her to think that this was something that is acceptable when you don't get your way.
right.
So I'm very proud of our vice president. I'm even proud of Mitch McConnell.
Hmm.
I'm even proud of Lindsey Graham.
Yeah.
For saying, listen, this is like, it's done, people.
Uh-huh.
This is it.
Hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Aisha's saying it's hard for the kids, but
Hmm.
we try to give them an overview, and that's absolutely right. And that's our job in order to raise woke children who are going to be the future. We have to rely upon Aisha's two kids who are beauties and my two kids to
Hmm.
carry us forward. And we
Yeah.
can't have them thinking that this is cool in the neighborhood. It's just
Yeah,
not.
we say this all the time on the show. And we talk about raising responsible adults because you want your kids to become responsible adults. And, that's part of having these tough conversations, I'm sure. And I don't envy you guys, you or Aisha or anybody else that's a parent right now that has to explain, frankly, the last 4 years, but, especially what's been going on the last few months in a democracy where we're supposed to be moving on and have a peaceful transition of power. And that's just not happening.
Yeah, well, so the powers that be put out. I don't think it was a tweet because I think the situation is locked down right now, or maybe it's open. Maybe the tweets are open. I don't know. That there would be a peaceful transfer of power on the 20th. Let's see. I have a client who's a doctor who was saying that, and he's an older gentleman, but he was saying, I feel like I need to go down there and fight for our people. I'm like, okay, sir. I know you have that, vigor, but I need you to stay able to treat people who are coming into your hospital. So you stay your behind right here on Staten Island, and if you're watching, you know who I'm talking to. Don't be going down there, all Rambo and stuff. We can't do that.
By the way, also, all I could think about when I was seeing these people, like, aside from all of what we were already talked about, is nobody with masks. Everybody was yelling and chanting and right on top of each other and pushing and shoving. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, our numbers are going to even start soaring even higher.
Yeah.
Yesterday was what, 3,800 people died.
Wow. It's
Yeah.
just crazy. It's just crazy. We just have to continue. I mean, this show is not about politics. We just wanted to send our, to express our thoughts
Mhm.
as lawyers and as women and as, a parent and auntie,
Yep.
as to what's going on in this country. So take it for what it's worth.
Yep. Yep.
So
And
now,
let's talk about annulments. Woo!
okay, so let's talk about the biggest thing. People, I hope y'all are it's 15 minutes in, 14 minutes and 34 seconds. What are we going to talk about, Stephanie? The biggest
Sex.
thing. You cannot get an annulment in New York and New Jersey because you didn't do the thing. You can't do it, people. Oh, you can't do it. That wasn't a pun.
Yep.
That wasn't meant to be a pun.
How many
But
times, like, if you've been married for a minute and then they come into the office and, well, we didn't really consummate it because, we were drunk in Vegas and nothing happened. And so I just want to get it annulled. Nope, that doesn't qualify. That's a
nope,
myth.
it's a myth. Boom, stamp myth. Right all over it. This is a thing. Don't waste your consultation fee, people. Trying to get a divorce because nobody showed up in the bedroom. No, that ain't it. I mean, maybe it is someplace. We didn't do the research on that. We should have done the research to see whether it's like a.
Yeah. I mean, New York, New Jersey, no, it's not happening. You have to have an actual basis for the annulment.
Yeah. So the actual bases for annulments in New York would be an incestuous marriage, right? If you have a situation where your spouse was married when you got married and your spouse is a bigamist. I have that situation right now, actually, and I represent the person who didn't know that the other person was married.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah, so we have an annulment going on right now, and the person who was married is saying, "Well, that's not true. That's not true." Okay, we could prove really easily whether you're married or not. You're not married now, but you were, and so therefore you were a bigamist when you said "I do."
So I've had years ago a situation where they got a divorce in the U.S. The couple was divorced in the U.S. and whatever their country was, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but they never finalized it in their country, so they were technically still married, and then married somebody else in the U.S. And the wife was aware, the new wife was aware of it, the husband was aware of it, that they hadn't finalized it, and they considered it just like some paperwork. And then the husband later on, and I'm talking like 15 years later, tried to use that as a basis to say, no, this is an annulment because their time's technically still married. There's no divorce, there's no equitable distribution.
So, but they were legally divorced here in the United States, correct?
Correct. And he did it openly. It wasn't like he was hiding it. And so the judge was like, nope, there's equitable distribution. I have the power to do it and I'm doing it. So you can take care of your paperwork there, but we're also divorcing you here.
Yeah. I mean, what? See, people try to play all kinds of games. That's just like people who get married in another country and they're like, oh, but we got married in Jamaica. Mr. Dow, if you're watching, that's not a thing. But anyway, they're like, we got married in Jamaica. We're not really married here. I'm sorry. If you got married legally in Jamaica, according to all of the residency rules and all this other stuff, then yeah, you're married here in New York too. So we weren't planning on doing that, but that just was a good segue into these things that people think, and it's they think this stuff because it's perpetuated by rumor mills, I guess. Oh, well, you don't have to do this because you didn't have sex with your spouse, or oh, you never registered your Jamaican marriage that was legal in Jamaica in New York. Oh, then you're not really married.
Right.
You're only married in Jamaica. That's not.
It's not how that works. Nope.
Not how any of this works.
But it is. It's perpetuated by people repeating these misconceptions and myths, and then people believe them over time. The same thing with like the common law marriage idea.
Oh boy, we might as well talk about that too.
Might as well. So New York, New Jersey, no common law marriage. Doesn't matter how long you've been living together. If you're not married, you're not married. Sorry about it.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, or I'm happy for you. But listen, if you depending on what the situation is, I could go either way, people. But I actually had a client. I don't know if I mentioned it here on our show before, but I actually had a client who had gotten divorced, but then decided that they decided that they were going to stay living together. And the client came to me and was like, well, I'm common law now, right? It's been 7 years because we've been living together for 10 years. No, I mean, I can't tell you how. Look, Steph and I really like what we do. We really love representing people. And so it actually does take a toll on us sometimes emotionally to tell people bad news. You should always consult with somebody who has a proper law license and does this day in and day out before you take on these assumptions and make them your reality, because it's so much easier, right, Steph, to make these unbased assumptions your norm because you
Yep.
just want it to be all right. And sometimes you need to know that it's not all right.
Again, like I said earlier on, I was thinking about this today, and then there's somebody's failure or refusal to tell another person the truth about what the law is or the status of, a regulation or a rule is, and then that person just feeding that information to the next person, and then you come up and you get the scenario that is just complete and utter chaos, is what we saw yesterday. That's what I was talking about earlier. But
Right.
in reality, you need a lawyer that is the one that you could trust, but also one that's going to tell you like it is. You need to know the facts. I mean, look, there's sometimes I have to have hard conversations with clients, and I think to myself beforehand, I don't want to do this. It's going to suck. It really is going to suck. And I feel so bad. I got a new piece of information, or I got, something that really changes their case where we thought it was going to go one way. But you know what? I can't keep leading them down the path of thinking it's going to go this way once I now know it's not going to go that way, because it does them a complete disservice. And by the way, they're then going to think that it's supposed to end up one way, and then they're going to fight to the death because they're going to say, nope, this is what you told me it was before. This is how it's got to be. And then they end up spending thousands upon thousands of dollars when they should have heard the truth to begin with.
Absolutely. That's absolutely right. And then, we become, if that's what we do, we become that stereotypical lawyer that everybody doesn't trust. And, we're only out to make a buck and all of this other stuff. And there are those people out there. We are not those people. And so, quite frankly, when people come to me, if they don't have a basis for something, I'm just not taking their case. I don't have the time or the inclination to take a case that first of all, I'm kind of, I like to win. You already know this. So I'm not trying to take a case that I'm just going to lose.
Yeah.
But I also don't want to waste people's time and money.
No, I 100% agree with you. There's some cases that I'll take that are challenging, and maybe there's something unique about them that I really like. But I tell people right up front, this is not a winner. Here's why you're more likely to lose than win. But here's like a really unique situation or something that we can fight and hang on to if you want to do that. How I feel about paying for college. So, I mean, if I could get the right case, if anybody's listening, if I could get the right case in the door to challenge the legality of making divorced parents pay for their kids' college, I would love to take on that case, even though the law as it stands says that if you could afford to pay, you have to pay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a challenging situation. And you and I have the same thought process on that. As it relates to forcing people to pay, especially when you're forcing people to pay and there's no relationship, that's a whole nother thing. I have a whole nother issue with that.
Yeah.
Because if I'm paying $30,000 and $40,000 a year for you to go to college, you best believe you better be at my house for dinner every other night. I don't care if you have to take the red eye.
And you better like it, and you better smile.
And better not ask for anything special because I'm okay? Let's get that straight. So now let's talk about a couple of other bases for annulment in New York. One of them is if your spouse has a mental illness that has existed for more than 5 years and you weren't aware of it prior. If your marriage couldn't be consulted to because you got into it based upon a fraud, like the biggest type of fraud is one where people say, oh, I want to have children, and then they know that they can't, and they just, live this lie. Now, if you get into a marriage and then there's an issue with fertility and that just happens, that's not fraud. But if somebody knew in the first place and they knew that you wanted to have children, but that they couldn't do that, that's a big example of fraud. And basically, if you get into a marriage and you're unable to perform sexually and you didn't tell the other person that, that's also another basis. Or if you suffer from a mental um, a mental handicap or disability that or illness that makes you unable to consent to the marriage in the first place. If you're under the age of 18 and your parents didn't consent for you to get married, this is another thing. I'm just going to be sounding off today on some stuff.
Do it.
16 years old getting married. I mean, it's not my great grandma day. It's
Mm-hmm.
not. It's not her day. you know. And I think she was 19 when she got married. I think she was 19.
I couldn't even imagine if got married when I was like,
But at least you're legal. At least you're legal. You know what I'm saying? You're over 18. A 16-year-old getting married and me signing on let me tell you, I mean, I'm not gonna say that I wouldn't because I'm not gonna put myself in. I don't know what you really can't just judge. But I don't think I would. There would have to be some really compelling situation going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I just can't think about the compelling situation right now. Like, I don't have one. At 16 years old, if my daughter comes to me talking about, oh, mom, I want to get married, there's going to be some.
I think your husband will also have something to say about that.
Oh, my husband, oh, Lord, it would be set off. Woo. Somebody, it might look like yesterday at the Capitol. I feel sorry for that poor soul trying to come and get my husband's daughter. Lord.
Oh my gosh. I can he'll be coming with the white flag. Please, come in peace.
Oh boy. But yeah, those are some of the bases for New York. And some of them they're very similar to the bases in New Jersey.
Yeah, I was looking up while you were listing them, and the only other one that's in New Jersey that's not really in New York is duress.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Or actually, I don't know all of them in New York, but duress is one of the other ones that you didn't mention, which is one that's in New Jersey.
But you know what I think that could be brought into the inability to consent. Mm-hmm. I think that somebody putting you in a situation where you're under duress would compromise your natural ability to consent. So
yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
And I wanted to add on to with the fraud piece of this. So I've had a couple of these where there's a drug addiction. And the person didn't know about the drug addiction when they got married. So that has been a basis to annul the marriage. And it was pretty good. I want to say 6 or 8 months they were married, and it was still granted.
I could see that. I can completely see that. I mean, that's a whole, anybody struggling with addiction has my full heart and support, because I will tell you, addiction happens in every family and to every type of person. And that's something that, even talk about being a parent, that's something that, my daughter sees somebody smoking and she's like, Mommy, they're a druggie. And I'm like, no, they're not. They have an addiction. This is what she says. This girl. I don't know what we're going to do with her. But I'm like, it's a cigarette. It's different than, other drugs. But that's what it is. And I think that, we have to have compassion for people. But what we don't have to do is allow them to manipulate us into being, married to them without our eyes being open to what the situation is. So that is definitely a fraudulent.
Right. I mean, look, if you accept this person and you understand their flaws and you're willing to work through them with them, and then at some point you're no longer willing to do that, then you get a divorce. But if the person married you didn't really disclose, maybe they said they used drugs every once in a while, but you didn't really understand that they were actually addicted and had a full-blown habit, then, that's a cause for an annulment. That's a fraud upon your marriage.
Right. Absolutely. And, this is a situation where you really have to be careful when you're litigating this stuff, right? you want it to be that you have the proof that you're able to what we call prove out your case, because trust me, if you're not able to do that, you're probably going to be better off getting a divorce
Uh-huh.
if you have other grounds, and most likely you're going to fit a ground, specifically in New York, irretrievable breakdown of the marriage, or in New Jersey, irreconcilable differences. You just don't get along with each other for 6 months or more. Don't come up with ideas of how you're going to concoct a story, because quite frankly, you're going to be wasting your money and wasting your time if you can't prove this stuff up.
Mm-hmm. Some people just feel like they have an affinity towards wanting an annulment for some reason, as opposed to wanting a divorce, because they think that there's some negative connotation with having gotten divorced. I mean, frankly, I think people get married and they get divorced. I don't consider divorce a failure of a relationship necessarily. Not an, abusive relationship, or there's,
Right.
certain, but people think, well, no, I really, really want this annulment. You don't, it doesn't really matter. You're probably better off getting a divorce a lot of times, because then you can have some rights and responsibilities that go along with the divorce context. Annulment is the marriage never happened.
Right.
So there's nothing, if there is debt that was accumulated, there's arguments that can be made, but, you're really saying that the marriage never happened. Also, for religious purposes, people don't always realize that you can get a divorce and then you can go to your church, and you can still get an annulment. You can go through the church annulment. So people aren't aware of that either.
Yeah, and you know what? I agree with you that people have this, they have this desire to just have the annulment, and it's almost like they like a purification of some sort that they go through, like, whether it's a mental purification that they can say, oh, I never made that mistake.
Mm-hmm.
Well, look, we all make mistakes in life. Many people marry somebody who was the right person then and turns out not to be the right person, because we all grow. Or they start suffering from different issues that you decide that, what, you can't deal with. But you have to have, like Stephanie said, that important consideration that if you do choose the annulment route, that business that your future ex got, no equitable distribution on that. Oh, maybe you were in this situation and you left your job and this person is supporting you. Yep, no spousal support, no alimony. So there are a lot of considerations.
Yep. We're at like 33 minutes. Should we just touch on marriage? How do you want to handle that? Or divorce, I mean.
Well, one of the big misconceptions, we'll do a couple. How about we do one each?
Perfect.
One of the big misconceptions that people have is that if they file for divorce, they automatically, magically have some more obligations in the case than they would have if the other person sued them for divorce. The fact that you file for divorce doesn't mean that you're automatically paying the other person's counsel fees. The fact that you filed for divorce doesn't mean that you're automatically having this person banished from your home because you were the first person who filed. There are a lot of different misconceptions, but those two are the biggest ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. And I think almost the exact opposite is the misconception that because you've separated, the two of you have decided we're moving separate and apart. I'm getting my own apartment. You're getting your own apartment. I'm now going to continue to deposit money into my 401k. And, she's deciding she's not doing anything but accumulating more credit card debt. And then you live your life and you think that, all right, we've separated. We said we separated. I've been paying her, a couple $100s a week. And then 10 years later, you come to find out when you go to file for divorce that she's actually entitled, or he is actually entitled, to share in whatever you've accumulated through the date of divorce, because it's date of marriage to the date of complaint for divorce. That all of that in between, unless you have an adversary that's willing to be reasonable and fair and say you don't have to share it, you're going to share it. That's the default position in New Jersey.
Yeah, that's the default position in New York. And I will tell people, I had this situation where this gentleman came to see me, and he was almost 80, and I just told him to forget it. Because, and yeah, I'm that person. if you come into me just because you have money in your hands and you want to do something doesn't mean I'm going to agree that you should do it or that I should do it for you.
Mhm.
This person was almost 80 years old and they had been separated for 20 some odd years. Just hang out. If the other person isn't wanting anything from you, if there's no specific need for you to be divorced because there's some legal entitlement that you're trying to glean or something like that, just leave it alone. You guys have been separated for 25 years. Your kids were grown. There wasn't going to be any child support request.
Right.
There wasn't at the time a spousal support or alimony request. So you might as well just hang out, let the chips fall where they may.
Mm-hmm. After all that time, how long were they married?
They were married for 40 some odd years at that point. No. Mm-mm. No. Sometimes you just, and it's like that old adage of not letting a sleep. What is it? Not letting a sleeping
Let
dog.
sleeping dogs lie.
Letting a sleeping dog lie. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what I told him. I mean, he was just going to open up a huge can of worms.
Yeah. We had one where they were separated for like 15 years and he was ready to get a divorce and he was being very generous with her. And he came to me and he was like, this is what I want to do. And I said, we can fight this for you. And that'll be our first position. But just so you know, if they push back and fight, we were in Ocean County, and I said, this is how these judges are going to rule. I can tell you at the end of the day, if we had a trial, I know these judges. That's back when I used to be able to say I knew what judges would do. Now I have no clue most of the time. I was able to say this is how it's going to end up. So we were able to negotiate something that wasn't a true split. But they were married for 40 years or something, 35 years. And then,
Yeah, see, those are the divorces that actually get to me because I'm like, wow, this is a whole lifetime. Especially when I was young enough to be like, oh my goodness, you've been married for, 5 and 10 years longer than I've actually been alive. Like, what is,
Yeah. It's not, look, we both take our work to heart and we both, like you said earlier, we love what we do. And sometimes these things like hit you.
They do.
Yeah. That 80-year-old man would have hit me too.
Yeah. And I met another gentleman in court in Middlesex County who was just as old. And I asked him, I wasn't representing him. He was just a nice older guy talking, I have a thing for the grandpas, so I was just talking to him. And I was like, but, Grandpa, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? And he wasn't the plaintiff. It was his wife who wanted to file. And so there's nothing he could do about it. But yeah, those ones hit me. Look, I'm all about, I was listening to Natasha Maine today. She has a on and popping Instagram page and she's a divorce lawyer in Florida. And I watch her Instagram videos every once in a while. And I'm all for what she said today, which was, look, if you tried and tried and tried and it really doesn't work, you got to be gone. Nobody has time, no matter how old they are, to waste their life on something that's not going to work. But if somebody comes into my office and I feel like there's a glimmer of a try, I might just tell them, go back and try, come back to me when it really doesn't work.
Right. You know what? That happens when people have found out that somebody was cheating on them. Mm-hmm. Because they come in the moment and they know they're upset and they're like, this is it, it's over. And I tend to always want those people to give it like, when you write a nasty letter, you say you're going to put it in the drawer for 24 hours and then come back to it. Well, I want people to take like, a couple weeks, a month. And then if you still want the divorce, then let's move forward with it. Because one of the worst divorces I had was a situation like that. It went on for close to a year. The two people did not talk to each other at all. If wife filed for divorce, she was adamant, this is what's happening. They didn't speak at all. They finally spoke at one of our conferences or something. And they said, okay, well, we want to just give us a minute. We want to talk a bit. Mm-hmm. Then they started talking and reconciled. Little did they know they both were like, didn't really want the divorce, but it was like snowballed away from them. And, we do our job and we go on with the litigation. We assume that you would tell us if you really wanted to put the brakes on it. But yeah, I felt really bad after that. And yeah.
Yeah, I had that happen to me, and the couple reconciled, and I felt bad because my client had spent thousands of dollars,
Same.
and we were going hard on this
Mhm.
gentleman.
Mhm.
And, then I saw them at Charlie Brown's one time, and I just felt so bad. I had to I went the other way. I felt so bad. They looked cute together, so, oh man. But,
Oh.
don't look, this is the time of year where people are like, I said I was done. The
New
holidays are done.
resolution. Mhm.
Give me that divorce. Don't just run into your lawyer's office if you're not sure. It's not the right thing to do. We will always be here to represent you.
Mhm.
Well, until my daughter buys me that beach house. Then I'm going to have to rethink the situation again. But in all seriousness, we will always be here to represent you. You need to make sure, and a good lawyer is going to see that something isn't quite right
Mhm.
with your motive, or even with your spirit around the divorce, and they're probably going to tell you if they're good. And if they tell you, that's the lawyer that you probably want to hang on to.
And by the way, nobody's going to want to, we're not going to want to push you into getting a divorce. So if you decided like you changed your mind, you need to take things slowly. Don't think that you have to move forward with everything. And I guess that's kind of one misconception too. People think that it's out of their hands. They've already filed and there's nothing they can do about it. That's just simply untrue.
Yeah, that's not true. You can always, in New York, you can always file a stipulation to discontinue. If you both want to be, if you both don't want to be divorced.
Yeah.
If one person wants to be divorced, then that's that.
Divorce. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I stop somebody from divorcing you, unfortunately.
No, you cannot. That's another misconception, that you have to consent to the ground for divorce.
Right.
Especially when it's irretrievable breakdown or irreconcilable differences. When those grounds first came out, people would say, "Oh, but I was happy. We're
Mhm.
fine." No, no, no. You're not fine if the other person says you're not fine.
And I've told people that before because they said, well, I've been happy. So now I'm saying there's irreconcilable differences because we did like a counterclaim.
Yeah,
So that's being dishonest. And I said, that's not being dishonest. Your partner doesn't want to be married to you. You want to be married. That difference is irreconcilable.
That difference is irreconcilable. For sure. This was a great, great, great episode.
It was.
Thanks for watching it. Thanks for allowing us to rant off a little bit in the beginning.
I know. Thanks for indulging us. We appreciate it. And we will see you next week.
Happy New Year. Live your best life.